Well, it's quite an honor here tonight on Good Night to be joined by Harvey Silverglate. You know him as an attorney, a journalist, a writer, and the co-founder of the Individual Rights in Education. He's better known as a civil libertarian, and the reason why I invited him on the program tonight is to talk about the First Amendment. So, Mr. Silverglate, thanks for taking a couple minutes and joining us here tonight. How are you?
Good. It's my pleasure to be on.
Well, it's an honor to have you on, and you know, some recent controversy has been in the Boston media. Some people have been removed from their jobs. Specifically, I don't know if you saw over the weekend that Jerry Callahan was removed from his job at WEEI because of some things that he and his former co-host Kirk Minahan were saying on the radio. And it kind of got me thinking about what better expert to talk about the First Amendment than you. And I guess just a real simple, easy question, but it might not be an obvious answer, is what is the First Amendment in the year 2019?
Okay. First of all, let me just begin by telling you that I have been a lawyer for over 50 years, and I have been involved in civil liberties cases and particularly free speech First Amendment cases the entire time that I've been a lawyer. Mm-hmm. And I have to tell you, there has never been a time when I have considered free speech to be in a safe position. It has always been attacked, although from different sides of the political spectrum. What is interesting and disturbing about the current situation that we're in is it seems that free speech is being attacked from left, right, center, from everywhere. Because we are in a point in our history where everybody thinks they have a sort of a lock on the truth, that they know what's right, they know what's good, and they know what's virtuous, and that everybody who disagrees with them is not only wrong, but it's evil. Okay, so those are the kinds of hard times, difficult historical periods, when free speech is in particular danger. Not that it's ever really safe, but right now it's in particular danger. So when you asked me to come on your program to talk about the First Amendment and free speech, I jumped at the opportunity because I think that it's such an important issue right now.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that, because today it was said on the Boston radio that today, you know, in today's world, it might be the most dangerous time to be on the radio right now. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And the fact that there have been talk show hosts who were suddenly unceremoniously let go, you know that the reason for that is because the owners of the station just don't have the guts, the intestinal fortitude, to take the criticism that comes their way, and some of it is quite vituperative, by the way, right. To take the criticism that comes with having somebody on your station who irritates a number of people.
And how did we get to this point? I mean, how did, you know, in today's age, how did we, I mean, I was always taught that if you disagree with somebody, that's good conversation. And me personally, I love it when somebody doesn't agree with me because I don't argue. I respectfully disagree, and I enjoy the conversation. And you know what? Oftentimes I walk away from the conversation learning something as well. Doesn't mean I agree, but I can often learn something.
Well, first of all, if you only speak with people who agree with you, you never really learn anything new. And you tend, what's bad about only listening to people who agree with you is that you tend to think that the world agrees with you, and you're not really prepared for hearing somebody who radically disagrees with you. So it's very bad. I'm particularly, as you probably know, I'm very interested in campus free speech, free speech on these universities. And I am aghast and horrified that so many students today on college campuses, mind you, you're not talking first graders, you're talking about so-called higher education, want to shut down anybody who says something that makes them feel uncomfortable. Students have this notion that in college they're entitled to comfort. They're as if their parents are spending 60 grand a year to send them to some place where they can be comfortable rather than where they can be exposed to new ideas and learn something. Well, it's horrifying. I'd be damned if I was going to spend 60 grand to send my kid to a school where all the student is being confirmed in his prior views before getting there.
So how did we get here?
How we got there is, historians are going to have to figure that out 50 years from now. But I can tell you, when we got there with the last presidential election, and almost half the electorate was shocked that Donald Trump won. That kind of set a new political substratum for the society and for the culture. And all of a sudden, the nastiness level of our politics, and I'm not only talking about Trump's critics, but the president can give as well as he can take. So the conservatives are increasingly nasty to the liberals. The liberals are increasingly nasty to conservatives. And also, there are two branches, I should tell you, of liberalism. There's traditional liberals, which I consider myself to be one.
Right.
And then the progressive, and the people who call themselves progressive, they are on the left, but they're not really liberals, because liberals are much more accepting of other people who disagree with them. Progressives, however, there's a level of fanaticism to progressivism that gets me very nervous, and I certainly can't call myself a progressive. Liberals and progressives are in very different camps. And the progressives don't treat the liberals very well. And of course, they can treat the conservatives even less well. Now, there are a number of conservatives broken down into two groups as well. There are those who are, like you, for example, if I may say so, who want to hear other people's views, are tolerant of other people. That doesn't mean you agree with them. That doesn't mean you think they're right. But it means that you tolerate them and you learn from them. And most importantly, you respect their legal right to express their views. And then there are people from the right who are intolerant and who really are the equivalent of the progressives, only on the right. So the society is broken down into these four groups: two groups on the right and two groups on the left, and the left and right each have one group of people who are tolerant of others' views, and one group of people who don't think the other guy has a right to even speak. So we are in a very contentious period. We're at war with one another. The country is in the midst of a kind of civil war. These are hard times, and very, very good times for people like you, who really are very important because you let both sides speak. And you probably have a conservative-leaning listenership.
Yes.
And they're able to hear somebody like me, who's liberal-leaning and also libertarian, express views that they may not always hear.
Well, I think that's the important part, is that, we can agree to disagree and we can learn from one another. But, now you look at the media industry has changed quite a bit in the last 20 years. And there is very little local media anymore, and it's all like national conglomerate type of media. And all these big businesses have to report typically to shareholders. And they're scared to death of getting sued or having somebody controversial on the air. But if one of these big ones, and I'll say it, WEI, if they would have stood up and Intercom would have stood up to maybe some of these activists going after them, would the problem have gone away, or would it ever gotten to litigation, you think?
No, because it's not easy to, it's very easy to sue, but it is very difficult to win. The First Amendment has incredible breadth and scope, and it is currently, given the Supreme Court for a long time, it's been through liberal-leaning Supreme Court and conservative-leaning Supreme Courts. The liberals and the conservatives on the Supreme Court don't agree about much, but they do agree about the scope and breadth of the First Amendment and the scope of speech that it protects. So we have now historically broad protection for free speech. And anybody who runs or owns a radio station or a channel who fires somebody because they're afraid that that person's views are too controversial hasn't really read much of the case law of interpreting the First Amendment, is acting out of fear and ignorance. It's a sad commentary on management.
It is a scare. It is. Yes. Management is scary on this subject. I'm glad to hear you say that. So, with the change in social media, you and I are both, I think it's fair to say respectfully, that we're not young. And social media is a new phenomenon in our lifetime. And I read things on Twitter and go, oh my gosh, like, can you talk like that on Twitter? And I guess you can talk like that on Twitter because a lot of people talk like that on Twitter. Is there ever going to be a free speech thing about what's posted on Twitter?
Well, people sue a lot, and Twitter is one of those a medium where the speech gets exceedingly nasty. But I want to tell you something. Nastiness is protected by the First Amendment. You don't look at speech and say, well, this is so nasty, it surely can't be protected as speech. No, quite the contrary. Nastiness is the reason we have a First Amendment. You don't need some very famous and well-respected legal analysts to put it this way. You don't need a First Amendment in order to say to somebody, darling, I love you. But you damn well need a First Amendment to say, you're an idiot and I can't stand your guts and you're a moron. That's the kind of speech that needs protection.
Right.
So the idea that the First Amendment only protects nice speech is ludicrous. That's the kind of speech that doesn't need protection. So it's the nasty, all of the important, forget about important, all of the First Amendment litigation involved speech where somebody said something to somebody else that was, ghastly awful. And most of that litigation has been won by the person who did the speaking, because the First Amendment is incredibly broad. Mm-hmm. People say, well, you can say a lot of things to somebody, but, you can't call somebody an idiot. Well, something? You can call somebody an idiot, because everybody who hears you call someone an idiot understands you're not making a comment about their IQ. You're making a comment about the credibility of their opinion. I'm not saying this person is literally an idiot who can't tie a shoe to places. When you call someone an idiot, it's metaphoric. It's saying this person's views are not worth by even crediting. This person doesn't know what he's talking about. Well, that's fully protected. It's opinion. It's not a medical diagnosis, for God's sakes.
Well, tonight my wife's going to call me an idiot, so after that.
And she'll get away with it, but not only because of the First Amendment, but because she has spousal privilege.
and that's probably more powerful than the First Amendment. So do we need to be worried in this ever-changing political climate? And it was reassuring to hear you that the liberal and conservative Supreme Courts have always protected free speech. Do you worry about that in the next generations or 100 years from now?
Well, of course, you always worry about what the Supreme Court can do, but I have to say that the court for many, many decades now has been consistent. And it has been consistent from the liberal Supreme Court under Earl Warren right through to the Supreme Court that began to be more conservative under Ronald Reagan, to the current Supreme Court, which analysts tend to agree now has a 5-4 conservative majority.
Mm-hmm.
The First Amendment, the primacy of the First Amendment, the breadth of the First Amendment, the power of the First Amendment has been basically unchanged through all of those political changes and all of those changes in the membership and the leadership of the Supreme Court. So I think that it's a good bet that for the lifetime of anybody who is alive today, that is not likely to change. So
Good.
I'm not worried about the level of protection of free speech, but I am worried about cowardice, bad judgment, newspaper editors, people who are radio stations and sponsors, and people who really are too ignorant and don't understand that they don't have to be cowards. They don't have to be hiding. They don't have to be afraid. They can let people on their stations and their programs just give their opinions. Opinions are protected.
Well, there you go. Hey, I could talk to you all night long, but I want to honor the time commitment that we agreed to. 2 questions before I let you go. Your old colleague Robert Mueller is going to testify in front of Congress next week. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I have never been a fan of Robert Mueller. I was a defense lawyer when Mueller was the U.S. attorney here in Massachusetts. And I really thought that he was a bit of a prosecutorial fanatic. He was in love with the FBI. I have to say, I have never trusted the FBI. I have a lot of reasons not to trust the FBI. But Mueller was an uncritical judge of the FBI, and the height of his career, he will tell you this if you can get him to sit for an interview, which you won't. He will tell you that the height of his career was when he was the director of the FBI. He spent his whole life hoping that someday he could actually be director of the Bureau. And he was not the kind of guy who, if you made a plea to him to show him that somebody who they were prosecuting, the Department of Justice prosecuting innocent, he was not so inclined to sit down and listen to you. He believed everything that, as he called it, the Bureau. I call it the FBI, called the Bureau. He thought that they could never make mistakes, that they were untouchable. And so he was a bad guy to be the special investigator. I'm no Trumper. I did not vote for Trump. But I have to say that the Mueller investigation of Trump was outrageous. That whole report should be shredded. And if you really want to find out about Russian influence in the campaign, there should be a nonpartisan investigation that the FBI has nothing to do with because they can't be trusted.
Well, there you go. That might be the headline of this interview. But last one. Student loan debt. You know more about campus life than anybody that I know. I mean, you must be much as appalled as I am with the student loan debt crisis in this country.
Yeah.
How do we fix it?
And what's your question? How do we fix it?
Well, I mean, it's my opinion, John Featherston's opinion, that the student loan crisis it's a huge financial crisis. I think it's somewhat by design to indebt this generation to the government. I think it's kind of by design. I also think it's criminal, my words, criminal behavior that you're putting young adults in $150,000, $200,000 worth of debt with no guarantee of a job, no guarantee that they're ever going to be able to buy a home. And it upsets me to my core about how it goes on.
Okay, my answer is going to surprise you, and it's probably my answer is going to cause you to ask me to come back on your program at some future date in order to further elucidate what I'm about to tell you. But I know an awful lot about colleges and universities. It's one of my specialties. Okay, I'm a criminal defense lawyer, but I've also been a lawyer in education cases from the beginning of my career. And let me tell you this. The problem is not just that the government has loaned money to students who have no chance of being able to repay it. That isn't the fundamental problem. The fundamental problem is that the cost of a higher education is so expensive. The reason the amounts loaned are so huge is because the tuition and expenses of higher education are so huge. Now you're going to ask me, why is it that the cost of higher education has ballooned so far in excess of the rate of inflation? And the answer is because colleges and universities now employ more bureaucrats, administrators, than they do teachers. There are more bureaucrats than there are professors. They have taken over, the bureaucrats have taken over the colleges and universities. And every dean, of course, in order to feel prestigious and powerful, every dean needs an associate dean. And every associate dean needs 2 assistant deans. And every assistant dean needs 2 deputy assistant deans. And before you know it, we're at exactly where we are, where the number of administrators vastly outnumbers the number of teachers. And that is a huge expense. You want to know where the money goes? That's where it goes. And it is a crime, in my view, to saddle students with this debt in order to pay these bureaucrats who don't have anything to do. They are always looking for things to do. Believe me, I spent a lot of time on college kids. They sit and fiddle their thumbs. They think up programs that they can justify their existence. They're sure not justifying it to me. They should all be fired. Boards of these colleges should look at the list of employees, should look at the payroll, and should immediately fire 70% of all of the administrators. And then you probably still have too many left. It doesn't take that many. Colleges need students and they need professors. They need very few administrators. And now they have an army of them. That's my view.
Well, I think you and I agree on this. And the last question I'll let you get away tonight with is when you hear Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren or any of the Democrats that are campaigning right now for running for president, and they say that they're going to wipe out student loan debt and student loans. What do you think?
I think that they're probably smoking something they shouldn't be smoking.
I would agree with you. He is the great Harvey Silverglate. He is one of the best interviews that we have. We hope that you enjoyed this interview. Mr. Silverglate, it's always an honor to have you on the show, and I hope we can have you on again real soon.
It's a pleasure to be on. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back here on Good Night. Stay tuned, everybody.